going to start by turning things over to Amanda Williams, who's going to land acknowledgement.
Good morning again, everyone. We gather today on the traditional territories of the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, the Ithaca, Stoney Nakoda, and the Tsuut'ina Nation, as well as the Métis people. The land is not simply a backdrop to our work. It is alive with generations of stories, wisdom, and ceremonies that continue to guide us as all live here. It holds a deep sacred presence. It is a spirit that is woven into the very fabric of our daily lives, offering teachings that we are called to honor and carry forward. As educators at Mount Royal University, we're not only guests, but stewards of this land. We have a profound responsibility to engage with its histories and the Indigenous communities who have long cared for it. The land, with all its richness, is our teacher. It challenges us to move beyond acknowledgement and embrace actions that respect, protect, and nurture the stories of the people who have lived here for thousands of years. This is our moment to act. How can we honor these teachings in our research, in the case studies we present, and the conversations we foster with our students? How can we challenge ourselves to do more than simply acknowledge the land and its people, but to integrate these voices into our work, ensuring that they are respected and amplified? Let us commit to learning with humility and openness, to listening deeply, and to creating spaces where the stories of Indigenous people are not only shared but celebrated. In doing so, we contribute to a future where knowledge, all knowledge, particularly the knowledge of those whose voices have long been overlooked and marginalized, is valued, respected, and carried forward for generations to come.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm very pleased to introduce this Elevate event. This one's a bit different than those we've done in the past, because this one focuses on scholarly teaching. And I'm thrilled to see so many people here. This might be a new record for us, so that's exciting. The idea for this event came out of an event that Rachael and I ran in the fall on writing cases. It was a fantastic panel, and at the end, Rachael said, well, I have an idea for the next one. Let's do one on teaching with cases. So thank you, Rachael, and here we are. We all know that teaching with cases is an example of great pedagogy because it involves showing students real life scenarios and asking them to apply theoretical concepts to come up with practical solutions. It kind of creates that bridge between academic learning and the real world. And when we teach like this, it can help to develop critical thinking skills. And also a lot of these cases present ethical dilemmas. And so this can help students understand how ethical frameworks can guide their decision making. Today we have three fantastic panelists, one each, from business, communication studies, and aviation. We have Kathy, Patti, and Chris, who are going to share with you how they use cases in their teaching. We also, I know lots of you do this too, so we're excited to have a robust discussion, and we have some students here. So I've kind of asked them, like, please jump in during the Q&A and tell us what this is like from your perspective. But please join me in welcoming Rachael and Ran, our moderators, and our three panelists to this conversation.
I guess I will start with the very first question to our panelists. But by the way, thank you for being here, and thank you our audience to be here. Now, the first question is rather general. So could you please tell us how you use cases to create a high-impact teaching experience for our students? And Patti, you're sitting next to me, so yeah, so do you mind?
Hi. So for me, I'm here sort of as the rookie person trying teaching the cases for the first time. So Amanda and I taught a board through communications course and has students from all our majors. And it's called Rules, Practices in Contemporary Communications. So we have a graded group activity and we try and make each week something different and unique. So we wanted to do a case study. And I sort of started by kind of going through existing case studies, looking to see if we could find anything that matches our course, shared them with Amanda, and we just felt there wasn't anything that really fit what we were trying to do. So we decided to write one ourselves and try it out. So Amanda wrote it. I gave her some feedback. It was a little different because it was scenario based. There was a fixed problem and not necessarily a fixed solution, but we did it through the lens of storytelling to help students engage with the idea. The topic that week, but I think this is why we had trouble finding anything that worked for our class, was incorporating AI into their workflow at a company. So the question was, we had this, we've done some readings on AI in their disciplines, how it might change what it's like when they go out to the workforce. And so the scenario was, we had a fictional media company called Prism. They were struggling with how to integrate AI into their workflow in a way that was ethical and preserved creativity and authenticity. And so we asked them to, the problem was, how would they come up with a memo or a policy for their company that they could share that kind of hit each of their disciplines, and to work through that. So that's how we did it, and it was a really interesting way to kind of discuss this issue and get them engaged for an hour in the class, working through a problem that's a real world problem. So I'll talk a little bit about whether it was successful or not, but I'll pass on, I think, the mic.
Thanks. So it's so interesting to already hear what Patti said. I'm a finance professor, and the course I'm going to speak a bit about is Finance 5010, which is our advanced topics of finance. And it's our capstone course within the finance major, and it's a requirement for every student in the finance major. And so the design of that course, the pedagogical design of it, is case-based by and large. So so there's sort of two aspects of the case integration into that course. And so we before we primarily use cases from Ivy. So I'll just start with that. For the first part is we embed case discussions to work through topics. So for example, one of our topics, of course, is mergers and acquisitions. And we don't have standalone mergers and acquisitions course, but we have standalone investment courses and valuation courses. So the mergers and acquisitions topic, we spend about 2 or 3 weeks on, rather than going through, okay, this is valuation model again, we put actual cases of time. And then they can apply their learning to their other courses. So it's around different, that's one example of a topic area that we use the cases for. But I think more exciting from my perspective is that the major project of the course is a requirement that every student within groups of 3 or 4 write an original decision case. And so it must be a finance-based case. It must be a case that's not been written, not been published. And the project, and then they actually have to teach it. So it's not just about writing the case. It's not about, they also do a teaching note. They are given, each group is given 40 minutes of class time. So the last 2 weeks of class, essentially our students are presenting their cases, and the students have to read each other's cases and be ready to discuss them with each other. So that's, I'll start with that.
Yeah, hi everybody. So I would talk about our what we do in the second year with our second year aviation students. We teach a comprehensive course called Crew Resource Management and Threat and Error Management. It's somewhat unique to the MRE program that we delve comprehensively in, as most pilots will not receive CRM attempt training until they actually get to the airline level flight training. So how we develop case studies, when we talk about CRM and TAM, threat and error management was developed at an academic level out of the University of Texas. And it's a construct to basically help pilots understand how they need to work together to trap and mitigate errors before those errors actually lead to accidents. Okay. The academic portion of that we do teach is quite, it can be quite a bit for the students to take in. Okay, it's very academically orientated. It's got psychological theory built into it. It has a lot of flow charts built into it, and that can be quite overwhelming to the pilots to put into something that is practical. Okay, so what we do with our case studies is we will take we'll give them the basics and the foundations of what a threat means, what an error means, what's this mean as we progress down this risk chart. And then what we'll do is we will take actual case studies, accident case studies that come out of Transport Safety Board, and we will apply those case studies to in the practical role, and then say, okay, let's take the threat and error management tree and now break it down and apply it and show, and let's show you and let's figure out how each one of these issues came up in this actual case study that led to these accidents. And then what we do is we discuss how we can mitigate. We ask the students to think about, in a team environment, think about what they would do and how they may have acted differently. And the whole process is not just about the pilots, it's also about dealing with management decisions that were made that put pressure on the pilots to take the path that they took that also helped them get into the accident. So we're trying to link the threat and error management sort of process and going through that problem solving process and practicality so that the student can apply it in the flight deck to work together as a team to mitigate and trap errors before they become a serious threat to the flight. Then we culminate that into 2 crew sim sessions. So we take them into the simulator and we run scripts and scenarios on them that put them in actual risk scenarios. We give them actual risk scenarios, and then we see how they're going to work together as a team to respond to those scenarios, to apply what they learned in threat and error management. In that tree, and all the academics we give them, how they apply that to making real world decisions in the flight deck. Give them 3 scenarios, and those scenarios, no right or wrong outcome for those scenarios. They have to work those scenarios out together. Some of the paths they're given that they go down are better than others. Some of the decisions are better than others. But we're trying to get them to understand to apply the concepts of threat and error management to mitigate and trap those errors. And then at the end of that, we have them sit down together and develop a very comprehensive post sort of sim evaluation, where we expect them to be really honest about their actions, their team member, what went wrong, what went right, etc. So they start to understand that their personalities also have an effect on safety in the flight deck. So we try to link it full circle that way. We're very lucky because we have a whole database of case studies we can draw from Transport Safety Board, Transport Canada, etc. And those case studies are really well known. They're very interesting to read. They go into the human psychology of the pilots. They go into experience, technical data on the aircraft, etc. So we're a little bit lucky in our area that a lot of these case studies are sort of pre-built for us.
Thank you so much for sharing information about the case study in your course. Now, maybe let's switch focus to students. Case studies approach has a really high students engagement and involvement. And we know sometimes students may face challenges when they analyze the case, and Patti, in your case, when they write the case and teach the case. So could you please tell us what specific challenges you've seen from students in terms of case analysis, and how do you help your students overcome these challenges? And anyone would like to?
Sure. Okay, so so sort of can broken answer down into a sort of 3 areas as a part of this question. I think when they're finance students, they're very accustomed to quantitative or right-wrong exams throughout their university career. So I think right off the bat, we talk a lot about there's a lot of fear of being wrong, that they might actually pick the wrong alternative. So I think I try to dispel that right away, that a decision case is not about right or wrong answers, but learning the process of how to use data, how to do an analysis that applies to a particular business situation. I also, because there's so much, I think, embedded nervousness about speaking up, being the first to speak up in class, and that you may be the only one thinking something. I often use documents, Google Docs, and Google Forms to capture answers, perhaps either at the beginning of class or in the middle of class, and then I can display them. And I find that that really helps get the students engaged and wanting to speak and recognizing that they're perhaps not the only ones viewing the problem in a particular way. I think the second piece of fear being wrong, learning, one of the really great values of cases is they're learning how to support a recommendation through facts and analysis. And so learning, case studies, for our case studies, I really have to emphasize, don't Google this, don't go looking for the answer. It's about just work with the case information provided, and they substantiate and support what you're recommending with that information. And then the third one, sort of related to the first, is just nervousness, speaking up. 25% of the assessment in finance and is participation. So there's a high incentive to participate. And so we have a very robust safety, because it's very similar between myself and Dr. Alan Dwyer, who also teaches this course. We have a robust rubric, and we provide the students in that rubric examples of what would be a 9 or 10 out of 10 for the first half of the course, what would be a 7 or 8. And we also provide, and I'll read a little bit, some guidance on what is exemplary participation, what is exemplary contribution to the class discussion. And things, just simple cues that read, reflect before you come to class. We even have a note in our rubric that says shyness and anxiety towards public speaking can be overcome with preparation, fulsome preparation. So, and it's a learning process, but what we see from the beginning of semester and semesters, a transformation, students' confidence. I'll stop. Thank you.
So my points have to do with, maybe because it's the first time I did it, my observations where I thought some maybe points for students to make. So one thing is, when I was going through all these existing cases, I saw this, a lot of them are really, really long. And so one of the things Amanda and I talked about was what the length of our case study that we were creating should be. So it's like any type of storytelling. If it's too long, you might give away the answer. There might be too much to read, so the students will just skim and move on to trying to solve the problem. The other thing is, if it's too short, you're missing all those signposts for the students about where you kind of want to head them and what path that they should find. So we tried to find that kind of middle ground, that Goldilocks ground. And I think that will help in the classroom to make sure it goes well. The other thing that I was considering was we sort of just let them go at it and spend time on it. And then they came back and they sort of voted on their favorite, discussed why it was good. But what we could have done is made some stopping points along the way, I think. And I've since read about interrupted case studies, so that you have, they're in parts, and then you kind of stop, bring the class together, make sure everyone's on the right page and you're not moving forward too quickly and leaving some groups behind. So I thought those would be an interesting way to maybe ladder the problem solving a little bit.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I'm alone in saying that I have students that are very reticent to talk. They're very quiet, seem to be getting quieter and less communicative as we go along. And one of the key issues for us is that we need our pilot students to be able to communicate. Communicate is one of the most important things they can do. So when they come into our class, they're all completely quiet. They don't want to talk, and they're really shy. We have issues with trying to break that barrier. Some of the things we do is if I have space, I'll change up the classroom. Okay, I'll break the classes and the desks into squares, and then I'll put them in sort of 4-person quadrates where immediately all of a sudden you break that spotlight effect on the students when you're asking questions. They feel they're more protected by a team, and then they're more ready to respond. I think we have some of the same issues that was mentioned. Our students are really performance oriented, very scared, being wrong, very competitive. They like to think there's a right and wrong answer for everything. So we work with them. One of the ways we work with them is we give them structure and guidelines by which they can go. Like we give them a decision process that they can use and then they can apply. And that seems to really break once they have that decision process in front of them, they can start to say, okay, I got it. Now I can start applying. I've made a decision. I'm going to monitor the results of that decision. Does that decision work? If it works, great, I'm back to a safe state. If it doesn't work, I'm going to have to go back to making a decision and starting that process all over again. And that helps them sort of break out and then get the communication going within the case studies when we're discussing them. I've done debates where we've broken them out in debates and had one side have to argue the counterpoint when you know the students are sort of pro the point, make them have to argue it. And we've had some really entertaining, we've had students that you think are the shyest students. Next thing you know, they're jumping up on the desk going, "You're wrong, sir." Making and really getting into it. So I think finding ways to engage and break through that shyness to be able to make their case. But I think sometimes we have to give them the structure by which we can allow them to make their case and understand, give them some guidance on how to get there and make it a sound argument. I think it's important.
I know we have students in the room. Would you want to talk? Are you willing to have any ideas or thoughts about the challenges or the positives that come with PACE in class? Yeah. Thank you for being brave. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you to the panelists for talking about this. I wanted to mention that my perspective is coming from a very introverted, shy student who usually doesn't talk much in class. I was taking some notes. I think firstly, when students are presented with a case, which is usually many pages, it's hard to unravel the case. It's hard to annotate or find a method for each student, like their own method for analyzing a case and taking all the important facts and leaving out the ones that are not as important. So I think if faculty members emphasized some solutions or some tips to students while reading the case, or how best to read a case, I think that could be great. Also, I think team building activity very much increases the confidence in students. I think that it also increases the openness to be creative and the adoption of ideas amongst your peers. I took an entrepreneurship class that really changed my perspective with the games and the little activities that we did before every class. So that is really enjoyable. And again, I am in Alan Dwyer's 50-10 class, so I can only speak for that experience. But the case that was presented that we are working through with the entire semester, I appreciate the choice of case and I appreciate the simplicity, yet the many complexities that came within that, because I feel like already reading it a few times, it has built my confidence in my own decision making, and with the discussions in class as well, I think that also has taken me out of my own shell a little bit. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you for that. Did you have anything you wanted to add? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you again to the panelists as well, and thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it, and I think that's one of the things I love about MRU is how involved students actually are in like our own education, because as faculty, you all include us, which I really, really appreciate. So I just wanted to echo, I completely agree with everything that Russell said. And I found as well that in classes where I don't think anyone would necessarily describe me as very like introverted or quiet personally. But I still find that in classes where I know more of my peers, whether it's from other classes or because our professors make us do some like team building activities or get to know each other activities, everyone overall, including myself, we feel more comfortable about speaking up in class just right from the get-go. So I think that really helps. And then, sorry, I'm just gonna refer to my notes here because I did write some this time as well. I think that in regards to like cases being too long or, and again, like what Russ has said about sometimes it's hard to understand like what to look for in a case or how to analyze it. I found that different professors also have different expectations of how you should be analyzing a case. And so I find that something that's really helpful for a lot of students is for professors to be very clear about how they expect us to analyze a case and what outcomes they want from us. And something that I found really beneficial is like a practice case that some professors will do near the beginning or whatever of the semester. We'll have a case and we all go through it in class and we have a lot of discussion, and that helps us understand from a student perspective what exactly we're supposed to be doing, and kind of also understand like the format that the professor is looking for, like the level of thinking, and a bit of like more thorough understanding of how we should be applying the theoretical concepts that we're learning about in these like specific situations. Yeah. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sticking around and sharing your thoughts. It's a really valuable contribution to the thing. I know we have some amazing folks for the first panel we did. We have some amazing folks who've written cases for Ivy, for exam. So we have depth of experience in the room as well. So we want to hear from you. But I have a couple of questions that I'm supposed to be asking, but I wanted to ask a follow-up question. So for someone who's brand new and they haven't incorporated cases in their class, what criteria or what are you thinking about when you choose if it's a group take-home project, that's a major portion of their final grade, if it's cases for discussion, if it's an individual project, is there something that you're looking for or criteria you're thinking about as you plan the overall course assessments? That would incline you to choosing it for a major project versus classroom participation. I know in the capstone here probably more is ongoing throughout the term, but are there other criteria that you might think about?
So I'll speak to sort of my early experiences with cases where I used to use an international finance, which is heavily topic based. So what I find for criteria, I'd often I used to integrate 3 to 4 decision cases from Thunderbird School Management, which is at Arizona State. It's especially they have a strong international business focus, and as such, it's international finance cases. And so what I would be looking for those those cases was something that aligned very closely to so one of the things we had done in class. So for example, cross-currency interest rate swaps, which is one of the more difficult sort of mathematical problems that a student would face in the course. And then I'm looking, quite sincerely, I'm looking for a real world case in that area. And there's a nice one that they had on McDonald's use of cross-currency swaps. And so to bring to life what was something we had done in the course, but I think in terms of the criteria, and I still use this for Finance 5010, I am very mindful. I appreciate the students' comments about the length of the case. I'm very mindful about, particularly the writing up front. I'm also very mindful that there's enough data in the case to support the decision making, so the students don't feel the temptation or feel confident that they can come to the answer or come to us a suggestion or recommendation. Not sure hope that's answering your question.
It kind of like, when do you decide if you want it to be like a to incorporate them as part of lecture or a major project? Like, that's super helpful too, because it sounds like there's a variety of sources for cases, and when there is a topic that you're looking for, you might end up writing them yourself, right? That's, yeah, if you incorporate it into discussion quite a bit.
Yeah, we do incorporate into lecture format where we can discuss a brief case study, and then we go through the process of breaking down the causal factors of what happened when, where did it go. I just have some notes on a couple of things that, like, when I'm looking at this, what am I asking the students to focus on? Is problem solving, analytical tools that they have available to them to make decisions, decision making in complex situations, because most of our situations are not a simple solution. So they're going to have to work hard to with that, and then coping with ambiguities, that the unknown is important. And then sort of when I give them guidance, I say, what is the issue? What's the goal of the analysis? What's the context of the problem? What key facts should be considered? What alternatives are available to the decision maker? And what would you recommend and why? And then I expect them to give me a robust defense as to why they would make the decisions they do. So I do think it is important to give them a framework and structure by which they can go on and clearly define as well, so that you're breaking that down in quite simple terms. So even if you're dealing with a somewhat complex case study, the process by which they can get to the solutions that they want to get to, okay, there is a framework there for them. I find that works for my students the best.
Patti, did you want to add anything? Are you good? Okay. We've heard about the challenges, and we've heard the challenges, but also some positive outcomes from students. What's your perception on the key positive impacts of incorporating cases into your courses?
So I thought it was just a very creative way to get students thinking about how to apply these concepts in the real world scenario. And they went to discuss it. They were discussing across disciplines, which we thought was really interesting. It gave them some talking points as they head out into the job market, because they've thought through this issue. And when they go to sit at a job interview, they'll have something to say about it, which I think was important. So it places a scenario and allows them to problem solve and think their way through that scenario. That said, like, we had a good time at it, but it wasn't the students' favorite thing in our class. So we surveyed them on all the different activities, and it kind of only hit the top 3 for a third of the students. Our students were more interested in role-playing activities and multimedia, because they're communication students. They really like to craft messages as a part of an activity. On the other hand, it seems like there's so much potential with it, and I'm learning so much here today too. I think I'd like to keep trying, maybe applying it different ways, because it does seem to, I really like teaching through storytelling, and I think it does really engage students and get some thinking and doing it sort of a fictional scenario or a real world scenario.
Yeah, I think in our case, the positive outcome for our students is that they're learning real world skills. Okay, so that they're actually going to apply when they get to their employment as a pilot. Okay, so I think we take some of these abstract concepts we teach in class, and by applying the case study, we're actually able to get across some actual real practical skills in analytics and decision making, leadership, and understanding too that sometimes you're going to be faced with situations where all the data or lack of data, you're going to make the best decisions you can make, and the outcome still may not be a positive one. That's a good lesson for us to learn in the room. Okay, sometimes the outcome is not going to be a great, beautiful outcome, right? So trying to apply it and give them the skill sets and define those skill sets as an instructor too. Like when you're building the case study, what at the end game of this, what skill sets would you like them to be able to take that they can apply into the industry they're going into? I think is a key sort of learning outcome that you should pay attention to, and then apply it. And we find our students going with much more confidence The feedback we get from our industry is that our students specifically are better prepared when they come to their employee and they come to the flight deck. They know how to make those decisions. They're better equipped with skill set to make decisions, which is where we put the team. So.
I'll just sort of briefly add, I mean, I think at the surface level, case analysis in a finance course is about applying a decision-making framework, learning to deal with ambiguity. I mean, applications, a lot of skills that they've learned throughout their degree program. But I think what makes me more excited each semester is watching how the students develop their professional voice through the use of case analysis and the ability to articulate, put a sound argument in front of the class and feel confident in doing so. And I think, to me, that's one of the most exciting parts of using cases in class. Sure.
Are there any, I have a question here around books or workshops or resources you'd recommend, but I'm also thinking for someone listening that's kind of new to integrating cases, whether or not there are some lessons learned from an assignment perspective or a marking perspective that they might, that hearing from you and your experience with cases might prevent a lot of time and effort learning on their end. But is there any thought around words of wisdom?
I would just say I've done a lot of research through Columbia. Penn State has some really good resources for case study, which is where I got some of my background from. I think we try not to create a high pressure environment. That being said, we still put a grade component to our case studies, because I think studies have shown that you get much greater involvement and impact. Just the reality is the students, if they know they're going to be graded, they're going to put more effort into it. Okay. And what level that grade is. Sometimes I found just a 6% here, 6% there. It's enough to make them really feel like it's worthwhile doing and engaged work that they're giving back to us is being valued as well. So that's sort of what we mean about it.
So I think to echo what's already been said, a couple of the things what I would really encourage is always looking at framework for analysis. That's been repeated a few times already this morning. So I do have a framework that I use regularly with the students. And in terms of finding the cases, finding appropriate cases, that's not where we were going, but I do tend to focus on IB as well, what I mean. And if it doesn't, I supplement our cases with readings. We don't have a textbook. I do supplement it with industry readings, say a research paper from CFA Institute or something like that. So that sometimes helps the students, but a little more context on the case.
We did the same thing. And for me, it's someone trying to wrap my head around it. I had gone through the IB website. You can register, you can download samples. So you can still get an idea what the case studies look like and to discuss them with my colleagues and see what would work for us. And I also found that Teaching in the Higher Ed podcast has some really good episodes on this that I found really helpful. As well as I found a great article called Storytelling as an Instructional Method. It kind of broke down different ways that storytelling could use case studies, scenario studies that helped me kind of think through what I was trying to achieve.
Thank you, guys. Do you have any questions comments, clarifications from the audience? I'll come to you with the mic. My bottom line concern with using case studies is the easy access to answers online. right? And I know that the solution is to write your own, but for those of us who are not going to jump into that right away, I'm wondering if there's a secret database that I know about that where those case studies are not as readily available, or they haven't been discussed online, they're less common. Just a hopeful, just a wish, just asking.
So for us, not that I know of. I would say though, I would encourage you to, in some cases, we reach out to industry and they've been very good to us about saying, we've gone and talked to them and said, hey, do you guys have did you have a situation or did you have a case study that you looked at internally? And a lot of times they're like, yes, absolutely. We'll give you all the data and the report. And so sometimes we get internal case studies that are not necessarily available in the public realm. And therefore it's fresh material. So the students wouldn't actually have access to it. So I think there, I would encourage, sometimes reaching out to your relationships in the industry can actually give you some of those case studies. As for us, the case studies we use are all public database through the government. So.
Sure, that's a good question. I've never worried about whether or not students are finding some sort of solution here, the teaching note somewhere. I think because I do it it's a discussion-based class, and I do change the questions a bit from the teaching note. I often add my own or remove some of the standard teaching note, and then I also like to, sometimes I go in and just keep them on their toes and say, okay, the who, the what, the where, the why, and just kind of rapid fire get them on their toes. So, recognizing, and I think because I'm not asking them to submit a solution in writing, I'm not as concerned about it. And it's interesting because when we do create Google Docs, I often break them into groups and they will address a certain question, say for 10 minutes as a group. And then discuss, and that's the way I sort of have them participate. But it's interesting because the Google Docs they never look like the teaching note that I've got. So I think they are doing their own work. And especially once you get them talking, the solutions and the approach they take, I think they're not using a candid approach, I would say. They're not using the answer keys. That's what I think.
That makes a good justification for having discussion based, right? Because you're not simply submitting, you have to actually speak and defend your position.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I still want to make a comment. I the teaching styles of instructors, curriculum and stuff like that. I think the most some components to that is to understand cultures first. To see what type of students do they have. Because each culture has a different learning style from home. And like you mentioned aviation, these students, they don't talk. They just listening and stuff like that. Take an example of aviation. So take an example of people who don't fly every day, and they don't understand altitude and all this other stuff because they've never been there on a regular basis. But that's why you have this inquisitive look in their faces, and they're scared to open up because they don't know. And look at that scenario with the indigenous people. Same thing. They're coming into a culture, different teaching styles, learning styles, curriculum, and they've never been there. And it's just it's with every class because they're not You gotta learn two things to go in there, to familiarize themselves with, to understand the curriculum. What's the end product of it? And I think to be on aviation, but you have to, like from a Blackfoot point of view, you have to teach them, show them how, and then create a curriculum after that. Because same thing with the finance. You know, when Europeans came here, for Blackfoot people, 150 years ago, there was no settlers here, just us. We don't have currency. We don't have banks. We don't know what anything but financial stuff. That was introduced. You know, and you gotta look at it from that kind of concept. Where at home, these students, where they come from. I mean, they come from that knowledge. And I think that there's a lot of things that beginning to incorporate teaching styles, it's the storytelling. It's very big in the country. That's how we educate our people through stories. Now, these stories, creation stories, the list goes on. Because we come from an oral tradition. You know, we don't have. And I always say when Columbus came here, he didn't find a slew of hospitals or libraries or dentistry offices, nothing. Those are all brought to us. And it's kind of a catching up. And it would minimizing our way of teaching and learning styles. So if we could find some way to incorporate those things, and I think we'll go for it. Yeah. You know, we're trying to show empathy for the students. To begin to understand the concept of what you're trying to prove. It's the cultural sensitivity, learning styles, and teaching styles. Like I said so much.
I mean, it sounds to me like part of the richness in case studies is that we all approach the story from a different perspective based on where we've come from. And so that could be the richness in the discussion, right? Of everyone's approaching this case or this story from a different perspective, right? And reminding the class that there's a diverse view of different situations. Thank you for that.
I'm very appreciative of your comments. One of the most exciting cases that I've embedded within Finance 5010 is called Raven Indigenous Capital Partners. And it's about an impact fund that was created out of Vancouver, taking and using an Indigenous lens to provide finance for projects with traditional capital. And it's an absolutely fascinating case for the students. When I asked the students at the end of the semester, what was your favorite, what cases, if you were me, what cases would you toss, which ones would you absolutely keep? The number one that they want to keep is Raven Indigenous Capital Partners, because they feel they learned something that was not taught in any of their other finance courses. It was an attempt, and I'm still learning. Every time I teach the case, I learn some more. But we with my students, we're learning, you know, how do we go about allocating capital in this context, and how is this organization through the lens? Just one, I think one of the most exciting, probably the thing I'm looking forward to the most this semester is one of our alumni is actually now the CIO of Métis Nation of Canada, of Alberta. And he's creating an impact fund for Métis Nation in Alberta, and he will be coming in as a guest speaker immediately after I discuss this case. So I think it's incredibly exciting development over a couple of weeks within the course. So thank you for raising that.
Thank you. Any other final, I know we're coming up to the end, but any other comments, questions, insights? Oh, is there one? Hold on, thank you.
Thanks everybody for this. One thing that I found really helpful with the Google Docs is giving students the opportunity to write their answers or what they think would be a good answer and then giving them feedback on it. And I actually do it publicly, which involves some trust. But what I found really helpful is I'll start with one answer and I'll update it and tell them this is the kind of language I want to see, this is kind of it. And then before I get to the next one, they've already started fixing it. So as a group, they're quickly tipping to make sure it gets better. And so as I'm going along, I'm like, okay, we're starting to get to that A. And so it's helping them see where they're starting. This is what you thought looked like a good answer. And then we're starting to see what the actual good answer is. So they can see that development from one place to the next. So I really encourage these Google Docs that way. So it's
That's a great idea. Well, good. Thank you. Sorry to end this from the back of the room, but thank you so much to the panel for their amazing experience and sharing all of your knowledge, and the speakers and the students speaking up. We really appreciate it. But let's give a round of applause to.
And I'm gonna turn it over to Leah to wrap up.
Wow, thank you so much. That was fantastic. Thank you, Rachel and Rand, for moderating, and Kathy, Patti, and Chris for your remarks. This is, like I said, the first time we've held an Elevate event about scholarly teaching, and I'm feeling very inspired to do another one on a slightly different topic. So please send us your ideas, because I'm sure you're sitting there thinking, oh, that was great, and I want to see panel on a different topic, so let me know. I want to thank Vicki for all of your help, and Beverly for the awesome food for today, Amanda for the land acknowledgement, our students for your great comments, Elder Hayden for always being here and sharing your wisdom with us, and thank you for being such a great, engaged audience. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.